The arbitration chamber fell silent as Vex Koloth's three primary eyes focused on the holographic display floating before the assembled delegates. The report had taken 14 cycles to compile, drawing data from 47 reconnaissance missions, 600,000 sensor readings, and the testimonies of 12 different species who'd made contact with the peculiar inhabitants of Solor. "This cannot be accurate," murmured TSA-9, her crystalline form refracting the blue emergency lighting into fractals across the obsidian walls. "No species reaches industrial spaceflight with these parameters." Vex Koloth's mandibles clicked, a gesture that translated roughly to a grim smile. "I personally verified every data point. The assessment stands." The hologram rotated, displaying a blue-green world swaddled in white clouds. Deceptively beautiful, dangerously unpredictable. Species designation Homo sapiens. Self-identified humanity. Homeworld soul-free self-identified Earth. Threat level. Categorical. Recommended action. Immediate quarantine. Termination authorized. Ambassador Kolzarex of the Harmonious Collective pressed all 6 of his feathered crests flat against his skull, an expression of profound distress. An expression of profound distress. Categorical? We've only issued 3 of those in the entire recorded history of the Council. The Scourge Swarms, the Void Prophets, and he trailed off, unwilling to speak the third name aloud. "And now humans," Vex Koloth finished. "Shall I summarize the findings?" "Please." Hyde Arbiter Morndax's voice resonated from the shadows at the chamber's peak, where the eldest of them all observed proceedings. Few had seen Morndax's true form. The entity was old enough to remember when the Galactic Council consisted of merely 17 species instead of the current 241. Vex Koloth manipulated the display. "Homo sapiens evolved on a Class 4 death world." SSC-9 chimed in disbelief. "Impossible. Death worlds don't produce sentience. They evolved there naturally," Vex Koloth interrupted. "No genetic engineering. No selective breeding by a predecessor species. Natural evolution in an environment where 93% of all emergent multicellular life forms went extinct over the past 500 million local years." The hologram shifted to show Earth's biosphere, massive reptilian predators, microscopic organisms that consumed flesh, plants that produced toxins lethal to most known biology, weather systems that spawned apocalyptic destruction on a seasonal basis, and tectonic activity that regularly reshaped entire continents. Their primary predators included 12-meter carnivores with teeth longer than my thorax, Vex Koloth continued. They survived ice ages that covered half their planet. They lived through impact events that should have rendered their world sterile. And when the megafauna began dying off, partially due to climate change, partially due to human hunting, they didn't just adapt. They thrived. Kolzarex's translator struggled with his next question, producing an audible glitch. How many dangerous species share their world? Define dangerous. Capable of killing an adult human. Vex Koloth's expression grew darker. Roughly 37,000 species, ranging from microscopic bacteria to marine predators weighing over 50 metric tons. Their world contains creatures that can kill through venom, constriction, drowning, evisceration, disease, parasitic infestation, and approximately 400 other documented methods. "What do they do about these threats?" asked TSA-9. "Nothing." "Nothing?" "They keep many of them as companions. They call them pets. The most popular is a domesticated apex predator descended from pack hunters. They have approximately 900 million of these predators living in their homes." The chamber erupted in alarmed chittering, whistling, and electromagnetic telses of distress. "Order!" Morndax's voice crackled like distant thunder. "Continue, Investigator Vex Koloth. Their psychology is equally concerning. Humans possess what they call persistence hunting instincts. They can track prey across vast distances, pursuing for days without rest. Their cardiovascular system is designed for endurance. They can maintain pursuit when other predators have long since exhausted themselves. Their ability to thermoregulate through perspiration allows them to literally chase prey until the prey dies of exhaustion. Surely they've evolved beyond such primitive." Kolzarex began. "They compete in recreational events called ultramarathons, where they run for over 160 kilometers. For pleasure. Some have run distances exceeding 300 kilometers, while maintaining complex tactical decision-making abilities. Vex Koloth pulled up footage from human settlements. But the true danger isn't their physical capabilities. It's their decision-making processes. Humans possess a neurological peculiarity we've tentatively labeled catastrophic optimism. Explain, commanded Morndaxa. When faced with statistically impossible odds, when any rational species would retreat or surrender, humans instead appear to undergo a cognitive shift. They begin calculating not whether they can survive, but how. Their brains release a cocktail of biochemicals, adrenaline, norepinephrine, cortisol that enhances reflexes, increases pain tolerance, and sharpens cognitive function. But crucially, it also suppresses their fear response and amplifies what they call spite. Spite. Vesanine's crystalline structure flickered with confusion. An emotional state best described as, I will accomplish this objective specifically because someone told me I cannot. It appears to override survival instincts in critical situations. The hologram displayed an incident from first contact. The Zephyrate Empire's exploration vessel Infinite Wisdom had encountered a human deep space mining operation, 72 cycles prior. The Zephyrates, following standard protocol, had demanded the humans cease operations in what the Empire considered their territorial space. The human response had been unexpected. The mining foreman, a human named Calthea Bex, was informed that her crew of 48 workers should evacuate immediately or face eradication by the Zephyrite battle group of 6 warships. Vex Koloth narrated as the footage played. Her exact words were, "Yeah? You and whose fleet?" The display showed what happened next. The mining ship, a converted freighter with minimal weaponry, engaged the Zephyrate battle group. It shouldn't have lasted 30 seconds. It lasted 14 hours. The humans had weaponized their mining lasers, turned their ore processing systems into makeshift mass drivers, and used their fusion reactor's magnetic containment field to deflect incoming plasma salvos. When their engines were crippled, they vented atmosphere to create unpredictable thrust vectors. When their weapons were destroyed, they rammed. By the time the Infinite Wisdom managed to destroy the mining vessel, 3 Zephyrite warships had been disabled, 1 had been completely obliterated, and the surviving crews were experiencing what their medical staff classified as profound psychological trauma. The humans hadn't won, but they'd made victory so costly that the Zephyrite Empire had immediately withdrawn from the sector and lodged a formal complaint with the Galactic Council, demanding humans be classified as a hostile species. 48 miners, Vex Koloth repeated, held off a military battle group for 14 hours using mining equipment. The engagement logs show they were making jokes over their communication channels until the moment their ship was destroyed. What kind of jokes? Asked Queljarex, horrified fascination overcoming his fear. The last transmission was from Calthea Bex herself. As her ship's hull breached and fires consumed the bridge, she sent, "Tell your emperor we were just the warm-up act." Then the recording shows her laughing until the oxygen ran out. The chamber remained silent for a full minute. "There's more?" Vex Koloth said quietly. "We've documented their history. Their own history. They maintain extensive records of their internecine conflicts." The hologram shifted to display a timeline of human warfare. Thousands of conflicts, millions of casualties, civilizations rising and falling in cycles of violence that would have exterminated most species dozens of times over. They've developed over 15,000 distinct methods of killing each other, Vex Koloth continued. They've created weapons that could render their entire planet uninhabitable, and then created more weapons as deterrents against using those weapons. They call it mutually assured destruction, and they've somehow maintained this balance for over 80 years without annihilating themselves. Why haven't they? Senine asked. With such violent tendencies, because, interrupted a new voice, they're also the most irrationally cooperative species we've ever encountered. Investigator Lysandra materialized from the shadows, her photonic form coalescing into a vaguely humanoid shape. She'd been the lead xenopsychologist on the human assessment team. Humans possess mirror neurons that create involuntary empathy. Lois Asandra explained. They can understand the emotional states of others, even alien others, with disturbing accuracy. They form emotional bonds with anything that displays even rudimentary sentience. We've documented cases of humans adopting infant prey animals from other species, raising them to adulthood at great personal cost, purely because they looked sad. She pulled up footage of a human child weeping over a damaged plant. This juvenile human is crying because she believes she hurt this non-sentient flora. She's experiencing genuine emotional distress over harming a plant. That doesn't align with the violence you've described, Kolzarax protested. Exactly. Humans are walking contradictions. They're capable of extraordinary violence and extraordinary compassion, often simultaneously. They'll risk their lives to save complete strangers. They'll sacrifice their own well-being for abstract concepts like honor or justice. And if you threaten something they've decided to protect, Sandra's form flickered ominously. You become the focus of that catastrophic optimism I mentioned. She displayed another incident. A human survey team had been exploring an uncharted world when they'd encountered a Crixnal slaver operation. The Crixnal were harvesting the local sapient population, a species of arboreal beings with limited technological development. The humans had 7 members. The Crixnal had 234 plus military-grade weaponry and orbital support. The humans called for reinforcements. Lysandra narrated, which would have taken 6 days to arrive. They then proceeded to attack the Crixnal base. The footage was difficult to watch. The humans used guerrilla tactics, turned the environment itself into weapons, and displayed an utterly ruthless efficiency that seemed to contradict everything previously known about their behavior. One human, Dravos Czech, a xenobotanist by training, managed to infiltrate the Crixnal command center using nothing but captured armor and what they called confidence. Lysandra continued. He walked through a military installation, past security checkpoints, and planted explosives throughout their ammunition depot. When security finally questioned him, his response was to set off the explosives while still inside the installation. He committed suicide? Thissa9 asked. No. He survived. Humans are incredibly difficult to kill. Czech had calculated the blast radius, positioned himself in a structural dead zone, and wore 7 layers of scavenged armor plating. He suffered extensive injuries but lived long enough to see the local species freed. His last words before losing consciousness were, "Worth it?" Did he survive? Kolzarax asked quietly. Yes. He made a full recovery and received what humans call a Medal of Honor from his governing authority. When interviewed afterward, he stated he'd do it again in a heartbeat. We've analyzed this phrase. It means approximately every 0.8 seconds. He was claiming he'd immediately repeat an action that nearly killed him. Morndaxa spoke from the shadows. I've reviewed all evidence. I've read the projections. Investigator Vex Koloth. What does the analytical matrix predict if humans achieve full spacefaring capability? Vex Koloth manipulated the display to show probability cascades. Within 50 cycles, they'll have colonized over 200 systems. Within 100 cycles, they'll have contacted every major species in the Council. Within 200 cycles, he paused, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Distress. Speak, commanded Morndaxa. Within 200 cycles, there's an 87.3% probability that humans will have fundamentally reshaped galactic civilization. They'll either unite the species of the galaxy into a cohesive alliance unlike anything we've ever achieved, or they'll destroy themselves and take half the known galaxy with them in the process. The Matrix cannot calculate which outcome is more likely. Then we have a decision to make, Morndaxa rumbled. We can quarantine them, limiting contact and hoping they remain contained to their local systems. We can attempt to guide their development, though every simulation suggests they'll resist external influence. Or we can terminate the species before they spread further. Vescolath finished. The Council has authorized protocols for sterilizing a death world. We have the capability. We would need to act now before they develop sufficient technology to detect the incoming strike. It would be relatively humane. Quick. The chamber fell into heavy silence as each delegate contemplated genocide. Finally, Quilzarek spoke. I cannot support this. We're discussing the extinction of an entire species based on predictive algorithms and fear. Fear based on evidence, countered Vex Koloth. Nevertheless, there's one more thing. Lysandra's voice cut through the debate. Something that didn't fit into the standard categories of the assessment. A pattern we've observed in every human culture. across every continent of their world throughout their entire recorded history. She pulled up images of human art, architecture, literature, music, cave paintings 40,000 years old, stone monuments that had stood for millennia, stories passed down through hundreds of generations. Humans, Lysandra said softly, are the only species we've encountered who seem to genuinely believe that tomorrow can be better than today. Not hope, belief. When faced with extinction-level events, they don't prepare to die gracefully. They prepare to survive. When confronted with impossible problems, they don't accept impossibility. They change the definition of possible. She zoomed in on a particular image. A human child's drawing of stars and spacecraft, captioned in crude lettering. When I grow up, I'm going to visit every planet in the universe. They dream bigger than their limitations, Lysandra continued. They reach for goals they cannot possibly achieve, and sometimes, inexplicably, they achieve them anyway. They've called themselves star stuff, contemplating stars. They see the universe not as something to fear, but as something to explore, to understand, to befriend. You're advocating we let them loose on the galaxy. Asajenine's crystalline form pulsed with alarm. I'm advocating we don't commit genocide against a species whose primary threat seems to be optimism and an unwillingness to quit when rational beings would surrender. That's precisely what makes them dangerous, Vexkoloth insisted. Or Morndax's ancient voice silenced them all. It's what makes them necessary. Every eye, sensor, and perceptive organ in the chamber focused on the shadows where the High Arbiter dwelled. I am old, Morndaxa continued. Older than most of your civilizations. I have watched the Council stagnate for millennia. We maintain, we preserve. We calculate risk and minimize loss. We have created a galaxy that is safe, stable, and utterly devoid of wonder. The entity emerged slightly from the darkness, revealing portions of a form that hurt to perceive directly, angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space, textures that suggested more than matter alone. When was the last time any species in this council attempted something truly impossible? Morndaxa asked. When did we last reach beyond our grasp? When did we last look at the universe and feel anything other than contentment with our managed existence? Silence. The humans terrify you because they're unpredictable. They cannot be controlled, cannot be categorized, cannot be made to accept limitations. Morndax's presence expanded, filling the chamber. They terrify you because they remind you of what you once were before you became civilized, before you became safe. You can't be suggesting, Vexkoloth began. I'm suggesting we vote. Quarantine, guidance, or termination. But know this, whichever path we choose will define not just humanity's future, but our own. Are we a council that destroys what we cannot control? Or are we brave enough to take a risk? The vote took 3 hours. Quarantine, 67 votes. Termination, 89 votes. Guidance, 85 votes. By council law, no action could be taken without a clear majority. The humans would remain uncontacted, their development uninfluenced, their existence unacknowledged. It was the worst possible outcome, or perhaps the most cowardly. The council had decided to decide nothing, to wait and see what chaos these improbable beings would unleash upon the cosmos. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Lysandra approached Vexkoloth. You voted for termination, she stated. I voted for survival. Ours, perhaps, or perhaps you voted from fear. Vexkoloth's mandibles clicked sharply. And what did you vote? Lysandra's photonic form shimmered with something that might have been amusement. Guidance. I wanted to meet them properly, to see if our analysis was accurate, and if it is, if they're everything we calculated and worse, then we'll have the privilege of witnessing the universe's most elaborate joke. A species of persistence predators from a death world, armed with nuclear weapons and catastrophic optimism, turned loose on a galaxy that forgot how to dream. She dissipated, leaving Vexkoloth alone in the empty chamber, staring at the hologram still displaying Sol 3. 53 cycles later, the humans made first contact on their terms, not the Council's. They arrived in ships that defied conventional physics, using an engine design they'd discovered by playing around with theoretical math. They brought gifts, greetings in 400 languages they'd independently developed, and an inexplicable enthusiasm for meeting new friends. The Council's carefully maintained order would never be the same. But that story begins with a human named Rector Volantis, and a discovery that should have been impossible. Rector Volantis wasn't thinking about galactic politics when she noticed the anomaly. She was thinking about coffee specifically, how she'd run out 3 days ago and the resupply ship wasn't due for another week. The Deep Space Research Station Tenacity's Gambit was 63 light-years from Earth, orbiting a neutron star that nobody had bothered naming because it seemed utterly unremarkable. Except it wasn't. Dex, you seeing this? Ratch adjusted the sensor array for the 47th time, convinced the readings had to be wrong. Dex Marquin floated upside down relative to Race. In 0G, directions were suggestions, munching on a protein bar that tasted like cardboard mixed with optimism. Seeing what? The void? Stars? Your increasingly concerning caffeine withdrawal? The gravitational lensing around the neutron star? It's wrong. Wrong how? Wrong like there's something massive hiding behind it. Something that's bending space-time in ways that don't match any stellar object in our database. Dex pushed off a handhold and drifted closer to Raichi's console, squinting at the data stream. That's actually weird. Weird how? Weird like I just ran the numbers 3 times and they keep suggesting there's a megastructure the size of Jupiter sitting in a dimensional pocket that shouldn't exist. They stared at each other. Cool, Rax said finally. Want to poke it with a sensor probe? Obviously. This was why humanity had made it to the stars. Collective curiosity overriding collective survival instincts. The probe they launched was a standard survey model, though standard was relative when humans designed things. It contained enough sensors to map a solar system, enough processing power to run complex analyses, and because humans couldn't help themselves, a small library of classic literature and a digital message that read greetings. We're the new neighbors. Hope we're not bothering you. The probe approached the gravitational anomaly and promptly disappeared. Not destroyed, not damaged, just gone. That's not supposed to happen, Dex observed. Nothing we do is supposed to happen, Recha countered. It's kind of our whole thing. Before Dex could respond, every sensor on the Tenacity's Gambit screamed warning simultaneously. The gravitational anomaly was expanding, folding space around itself like reality was taffy, and something was emerging from the impossible pocket dimension they just poked with their metaphorical stick. It was a ship. Maybe. Possibly. The structure defied easy categorization, simultaneously crystalline and organic, its surface flowing with patterns that hurt to look at directly. It was also enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest human vessel ever constructed, and it was moving toward them. Okay, Rachel said with remarkable calm. That's new. Should we run? Dex asked. Where? It just traveled through a dimensional fold. I don't think running is on the table anymore. Fair point. Should we send a message? Like what? Sorry for disturbing your dimensional nap. Before they could debate further, their communications systems activated without input. A voice translated through their ship's AI but clearly not human resonated through the station. Beings of vessel Tenacity's Gambit. You have accessed a restricted dimensional anchor point established by the Galactic Council. Your presence here violates quarantine protocols established 53 cycles prior. Please remain stationary while we determine appropriate containment measures. Raish and Dex exchanged glances. Galactic Council. Dex whispered. Quarantine? We're quarantined? Raish felt her temper, legendary among her colleagues, beginning to spark. Since when? She grabbed the communication interface. This is Dr. Rek Volantis of the human research vessel Tenacity's Gambit. With all due respect to your council, we didn't receive any memo about quarantine protocols. Probably because nobody sent us one. Which seems like a significant oversight if you're actually trying to quarantine someone. Silence from the alien vessel. Then, you are human. Last time I checked. You got a problem with that? More silence. Rachel could almost hear frantic consultations happening on the other ship. Finally, please stand by. This situation requires escalation. That's not ominous at all, Dex muttered. Over the next 6 hours, the alien ship, which identified itself as the Council Enforcement Vessel Harmonious Compliance, maintained position while apparently calling for backup. Reese used the time to analyze the dimensional pocket technology, because humans couldn't see something impossible without trying to figure out how it worked. It's fascinating, she told Dex, her earlier irritation transforming into scientific excitement. They're essentially folding space-time along 11-dimensional matrices, creating stable pocket universes that exist perpendicular to standard reality. The energy requirements should be astronomical, but they've found a way to harvest dark matter fluctuations to create a sustainable field matrix. What? Dex pointed at the viewscreen. 4 more vessels had emerged from the dimensional fold, each radiating weapon signatures that their sensors could barely classify. I think they're here to blow us up, Dex said with the tone of someone commenting on the weather. That seems excessive. I'm just saying, 5 heavily armed warships don't usually show up for friendly chats. A new voice interrupted their debate. Older, carrying weight that transcended mere age. Humans of Tenacity's gambit. I am Observer Vex Koloth of the Galactic Council. We have a complication. Just one? Rek asked. Because from here it looks like 5 complications with impressive gun arrays. Your species was meant to remain within your local stellar cluster for at least another century. Your presence here, 63 light-years from your homeworld and actively probing our dimensional technology, represents a severe breach of containment. Containment? Rax's temper flared fully now. You don't contain people. That's called imprisonment, and it's generally frowned upon by sapient beings who value autonomy. You don't understand? Then explain it. Rantra cut through the communication with the sharpness of someone who'd spent her childhood arguing with bureaucrats over research permits. You've got our attention. You've got us outnumbered, and you've apparently been watching us like we're lab rats, so explain why we're supposed to accept being quarantined by people who won't even introduce themselves properly. Another pause. Then, surprisingly, you're correct. This situation has been handled poorly. Would you be willing to dock with our vessel? Under diplomatic protocols, no harm will come to you. You have my word as an observer. Dex grabbed Rachi's arm. This is a terrible idea. Probably. They could be lying. Maybe. We should definitely not do this. Rach grinned. When has that ever stopped us? 20 minutes later they were boarding the Harmonious Compliance, wearing light pressure suits because humans trusted alien life support about as far as they could throw a neutron star. The interior of the ship was breathtaking, literally, as the atmospheric mixture was wrong and they needed their suit recyclers. But architecturally it was magnificent. Flowing spaces that suggested impossibility, materials that shifted colors based on viewing angle, and gravity that didn't seem to understand Newton's laws. They met Observer Vex Koloth in what translated as a contemplation chamber, a circular space with transparent walls showing the starfield beyond. The Vex Koloth was insectoid, massive mantis-like build. 4 arms, 3 eyes arranged triangularly on a head that suggested predatory efficiency. But his posture was careful, almost respectful. You came, he stated. You invited? Rach replied. Seemed rude to decline. Also, you've got us surrounded by warships, so our options were limited. Those vessels are not here to threaten you. They're here because Vex Koloth's mandibles clicked in what their translator interpreted as frustrated amusement. They're here because nobody on the council believed humans would actually leave their home cluster this quickly. You've had practical spaceflight for barely a century. You shouldn't have the technology for interstellar travel. You certainly shouldn't have the theoretical framework for detecting dimensional anomalies. And yet, Dex spread his hands. Here we are. Funny how reality keeps disagreeing with everyone's predictions. That, Vex Koloth said heavily, is precisely the problem. He activated a holographic display, the same report that had been presented to the Council 53 cycles prior. Rech and Dex watched in growing disbelief as their species was dissected, analyzed, and ultimately classified as a Category 9 threat. You think we're monsters, Rex said flatly when the presentation concluded. We think you're dangerous, Vex Koloth corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Because that report made us sound like rabid animals that need to be put down. Some council members voted for exactly that. Vex Koloth met her gaze with all 3 eyes. 89 votes for termination. For sterilizing your planet before your species could spread. They failed to achieve majority. But it was close. The temperature in the room seemed to drop despite the alien climate control. You voted to genocide us, Dex said, his usual humor completely absent. You looked at our species, decided we were too scary, and nearly pushed the button on extinction. Some of us did. Vex paused. I voted for termination. Yes, Raish laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. And now we're face to face. Must be awkward for you. Profoundly. So what changed? Why are we having this conversation instead of you finishing what your council started? Vex mandibles clicked rapidly. Uncertainty. Because I was wrong. Or possibly right for the wrong reasons. Or perhaps the categories we use to evaluate threat are fundamentally flawed when applied to your species. He pulled up another display, the past 53 cycles of human development, the expansion into their own solar system, the establishment of colonies on hostile worlds, the development of fusion drives, quantum communication, and theoretical physics that challenged established models. You're developing faster than any species in recorded history, Vex explained. But it's not just speed, it's direction. Every other spacefaring species follows predictable patterns. They expand cautiously, establish strong supply lines, build gradually. He zoomed in on the Tenacity's Gambit's mission profile. You send 2 scientists 63 light-years away to study an unremarkable neutron star using an experimental engine design that's only been tested 4 times. Because you were curious. Curiosity is dangerous now? Ratch demanded. When combined with catastrophic optimism, imperfect fear responses, and a biological predisposition toward persistence hunting. Yes. Absolute. We're scientists, not hunters. You're both. That's what concerns us. Tex spoke up, his voice carefully controlled. Let me see if I understand this. You've been watching us. You classified us as threats. You debated killing us. And now that we've broken your containment, accidentally I might add, you're what? Asking for our permission to keep us locked up. No. The new voice came from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. A presence materialized, not fully, just enough to suggest impossible geometry and perspectives that didn't resolve in 3 dimensions. High Arbiter Morndaxa. Vex bowed, a gesture that looked painful for his physiology. Observer Vex you may return to your vessel. But, now, Vex departed, mandibles clicking frantically. Morndax's presence solidified slightly. Though Ratch's eyes still hurt trying to focus on it properly. I apologize for the observer's approach. He means well, but he's still operating from fear. And you're not? Ratch challenged. Oh, I'm terrified. The entity's voice carried something that might have been amusement. But I'm also curious. That makes us alike, Dr. Volantis. How did you know your name? I've been watching humanity since before your species developed written language. I've seen your cave paintings. I've read your philosophers. I've listened to your music. I've watched you reach for the stars with nothing but mathematics and determination. Morndaxa moved closer. And reality seemed to bend around the entity. You want to know why you were quarantined? Not because we think you're monsters. Because we know you'll change everything. That's cryptic, Dex observed. The Galactic Council has existed for over 47,000 years. Morndaxa continued. In that time we've achieved remarkable things. Universal translation. Peaceful coexistence among hundreds of species. Trade networks spanning the galaxy. Scientific understanding that makes your current technology look like stone tools. Sounds pretty good, Ratchu admitted reluctantly. It's stagnant. Morndax's presence pulsed with something like frustration. We've become so focused on maintaining what we have that we've stopped reaching for what we could have. We play it safe. We calculate risks down to the 1,000th decimal point. We've forgotten how to dream. The entity focused fully on them, and Raiche felt the weight of genuine ancient attention. Then we detected your species. A collection of persistence predators from a death world, armed with nuclear weapons and an apparently pathological inability to accept limitations. You argue with reality and sometimes win. You take impossibilities as challenges. You look at the universe and don't see dangers to avoid. You see puzzles to solve. You're saying we're... What? Inspiring? Dex sounded skeptical. I'm saying you're terrifying in the best possible way. You remind us of what we've lost. The audacity to try things that might fail. The willingness to risk everything for abstract concepts like discovery or knowledge. The sheer bloody-minded determination to keep pushing forward even when it would be easier to stop. Morn Daxa pulled up a display of the Tenacity's Gambit's mission logs. You launched this mission knowing the engine might fail. Knowing you might never return home. Knowing that you were exploring something completely unknown. And when I asked your mission commander why she approved such a dangerous expedition, do you know what she said? What? Reishi asked. Because Rak asked nicely. And who am I to tell someone they can't chase their dreams into the dark? That sentence terrified half the council and fascinated the other half. So what happens now? Rat demanded. Do we go back to our quarantine? Do you tell us to stay in our corner of the galaxy while you maintain your safe, boring paradise? Morndax's presence expanded, filling the chamber with something that might have been laughter. No, Dr. Volantis. Now we make first contact official. Now we introduce you to the galaxy. Now we see if your catastrophic optimism is contagious. And if we break everything? Dex asked. If we're as dangerous as your reports suggest, then at least something will finally change. Korvax began to fade. The council voted for inaction, but I have executive authority in matters of galactic security. And I've decided that your species represents not a threat to civilization, but to our comfortable stagnation. Consider yourselves unquarantined. Just like that? Resha was stunned. Just like that. Though I suspect you'll wish I'd kept you locked up once the council bureaucrats start sending you forms to fill out. We have 17,000 standard first contact protocols, and I'm afraid you'll need to complete all of them. Bureaucracy, Dex groaned. That's your weapon of mass destruction. We've found it quite effective at slowing down aggressive species. The entity's presence vanished completely, leaving only a final message floating in holographic text. Welcome to the galaxy, humans. Try not to break too many of our carefully maintained systems. Or do it might be entertaining. Rax and Dex stood alone in the contemplation chamber, staring at each other. So Dex said, eventually, we accidentally ended humanity's secret quarantine by poking something we probably shouldn't have poked. Seems like it. And now we're officially part of some massive galactic civilization. Yep. And this ancient cosmic being basically said we're too stubborn to contain. That's the gist. Dex considered this. Want to grab some terrible ship coffee and figure out how to explain this to Earth, obviously, though I'm mainly wondering how long it'll take us to figure out that dimensional fold technology. Because that was amazing. Rack, we just made first contact with an interstellar alliance. Shouldn't we be more, don't know, awed, frightened? Something other than immediately trying to reverse engineer their tech? Rayshig grinned. Dex, they spent 50 years terrified of us because we're curious, persistent, and apparently too optimistic for our own good. I'm not about to prove them wrong by being boring now. She pulled up the sensor data they'd collected on the dimensional technology, her eyes already gleaming with scientific passion. Besides, imagine what we could do with stable pocket dimensions. We could revolutionize storage, travel, computing, energy generation. You're proving their point, Dex interrupted. But he was grinning too. They said we see the universe as puzzles to solve, and you're literally trying to solve their most advanced tech before we've even left their ship. It's who we are. Reshe pulled up another analysis screen. They wanted to know if we're dangerous, if catastrophic optimism is contagious, if we'll change their carefully maintained civilization. She looked at Dex, then at the starfield beyond the transparent walls, a galaxy full of possibilities, problems, and peoples they'd never imagined. What do you think? Dex laughed. I think they have no idea what they've just unleashed. And I think it's going to be glorious. On board the Harmonious Compliance, Observer Vex Kalath watched the two humans already deep in analysis of technologies they shouldn't even understand, and felt a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. High Arbiter, he spoke into the private communication channel. They're already trying to reverse engineer our dimensional technology, using equipment they brought for studying neutron stars. Morn Dax's response carried unmistakable amusement. How long until they succeed? Our top scientist estimated it would take any new species approximately 800 years to develop the theoretical framework necessary to understand dimensional folding. In the humans, Vex Koloth watched Rax Volantis sketch equations in midair, her colleague adding variables faster than the translation software could keep up. I give them 6 months. Maybe less if they get access to our research databases. Excellent. Horndax's presence pulsed with something like satisfaction. The galaxy has been boring for far too long. Let's see what happens when we add humans to the equation. You realize this might end catastrophically, or magnificently. Either way, observer, at least we'll feel something other than comfortable predictability. The communication ended, leaving Vex Koloth alone with his concerns and a growing sense that the galaxy was about to become a much more interesting and chaotic place. 3 weeks later, Raiche Volantis submitted her preliminary paper on dimensional fold mechanics to the galactic scientific community. It proposed 17 modifications to existing theory, challenged 3 fundamental assumptions about space-time topology, and suggested applications that made senior researchers question whether they'd been doing theoretical physics wrong for millennia. The paper was titled "So About Those Impossible Pocket Dimensions." A human perspective on why impossible just means nobody's tried hard enough yet. It immediately became the most controversial scientific publication in galactic history. Humanity had officially joined the cosmic community. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in the depths of space, Morndaxa laughed, a sound like stars colliding and realities bending, and thought that perhaps, just perhaps, the Council's greatest achievement wasn't the civilization they'd built. It was having the courage to let something dangerous and wonderful loose within it. The humans were here, and they'd brought catastrophic optimism with them.